right, boys and girls, we are back with another edition of The Big Ben Show. I'm your host, Ben Domenech. You can follow me on X at bdomenech. Email the show at bigben@fox.com. Follow me on Substack at my newsletter, thetransom.com, and subscribe to the magazine that I am editor-at-large of, The Spectator, at thespectator.com. And today, I want to talk to you a little bit about a graphic that went viral, something that you don't typically see when it's referring to different data about the way that we're living. But it was shocking, I think, to a lot of people to see something that illustrated how big of a change has happened in America from the not so distant past. What's going on there? Well, it's something like this.
Many longtime homeowners, especially baby boomers, who hold the majority of housing wealth in this country, and they're sitting on massive gains and are hesitant to sell because they'd face capital gains taxes.
What's important about this graph is it shows the actual reality of what's happening on the ground in the lives of young Americans. And as you pointed out, it's shocking because it shows this cratering in the percent of young people who are both homeowners and also married.
That's Nathan Halberstadt. He is the chief of staff at New Founding. You can follow him on X at Nat Halberstadt. That he put that chart up there, and it almost immediately grabbed viral attention. That's him talking to Anthony Pompliano, by the way. This is a situation that I think where you see something that you kind of suspected. You knew that there was going to be something that was going on within society where there were fewer people who were getting married, there were fewer people who were owning homes. But the graphic shows that back in the 1950s, you had more than half of the people under the age of 30 married and owning a home. And today, that figure is actually below 20%. It's below even 15%, according to the data set that Nat Halberstadt used. There are different data sets within this, so you can have arguments among economists about this. But one of the things that I think we need to understand about this is that there are multiple factors going on here. It's not just housing affordability, though that's a big part. We have the baby boomers who have so much housing wealth holding on to what they have. We have the refusal of many states, including particularly California, to allow for new home building. There's this whole NIMBY movement that says basically you don't want to have more development in your backyard. And then you wonder why your sons and daughters haven't been able to find a home that they can afford, haven't been able to settle down, and haven't been able to move into a place where they feel like they ought to drive to have a family. On the flip side of that, the marriage side of this, that's a situation that has a cultural component and a technological component, where the different dating apps and the like, and the different social pressures and cultural priorities of people, the lessons that they take as well from pop culture around them, all drive them toward having later and later dates of marriage, and of course, because of that, later and later dates of having kids, family formation, etc. There's a lot going on here, but one of the things that I think we need to understand is that only some of this can be solved on a federal level. We just had this big, beautiful bill, and there's these incentives in it. There's a new, Trump account that you can invest in that could grow potentially to being worth over, $1.5 million, according to different estimates over time. If you invest in it, you could have, these different incentives that are placed financially in order to try to make up for some of the elements that are happening on the ground level. But until these states actually allow the kind of building that we need to see in America, the kind of housing creation, the kind of expansion of the marketplace that will meet the demand that people have toward home ownership, particularly among this young cohort, you're going to continue to see this be a problem. But the limits there need to be acknowledged as well. Much of this is something that has to do with the cultural connection that people make, how much it's delayed currently, how few people are getting married at a stage when in the past they would have been expected to do so, and how little social pressure comes to play in a good way on people in order to get them to get married, to settle down, to make a decision, to decide at a point where you can actually have kids and that you're not running up against a clock. That's something that I think, unfortunately, has gone away in our time. So what I'm actually calling for right now is more grandmothers, more moms, more dads to say, make a decision, settle down, figure it out. Don't just dawdle. Don't just wait around. And I'm telling you this as someone who really believes that we need to have that type of cultural change in order to have the kind of community change, the type of change in neighborhood that we need as a country to get back to the point where families know each other, where they have the shared responsibility of raising kids together, where they can share responsibilities and duties, and all at a stage where they're young enough to not be completely exhausted at the end of the day, as I, who didn't become a father until his late 30s, am every single day. You're listening to another edition of The Big Ben Show. Email us as always at bigben@fox.com. We'll be back with more right after this. And we're back on The Big Ben Show. I'm happy to be joined today by Chef Andrew Gruel. He is someone who you probably know from the airwaves as a TV personality, California politician even. And you can follow him on X at Chef Gruel and at Andrew Gruel on Instagram. Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
I want to talk to you with the beginning part of this conversation about the most important things that are going on in California right now in terms of rebuilding from all the different disasters that have happened there. It seems like there has been none, that the regulatory state there has really crushed the ability of Californians to come back, to rebuild their homes, et cetera. I've seen, some of the astounding photography of places that, were reduced to rubble or even worse, that still seem to have no activity associated with them. Do you think that this is just kind of the emblematic state of California today? It's such a beautiful state, so hopeful in so many ways, but also just getting in their own way?
Certainly. It's been almost 8 months and it's still a disaster zone. It looks as if the fires were 3-4 days ago, absent maybe a little bit of lingering smoke, and absolutely nothing has been done. If you recall, Newsom and various other officials went up on the soapbox within days of the fires and said, we're going to strip all the regulations and rebuild. Trust me, I'll wave this executive wand from in Sacramento, and absolutely nothing has happened. It really is a tragedy. And, I'm not one to always indulge in the conspiracies and all the, various puzzle pieces that perhaps could be put together from afar. But when you start to see the level of the negligence and people now selling their homes, the inability to get back in their homes, just the complete wipeout of this area, and then suggestions that they're going to rebuild with, much higher density, affordable housing, and it's going to be this new utopia that Newsom and his cronies have envisioned, you start to wonder if that's true.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that has obviously been an item of reporting more recently is about where all the money has gone in terms of outflows, and that the communities really haven't seen it reach them. That these fires, led to obviously a whole, a huge amount of spending, but it seems to have gone to a lot of different nonprofits that have almost nothing to do with coming back from the fires, and in some cases, nothing at all. What are your thoughts about the way that has worked or hasn't? Is there any hope that that can be adjusted, or is this a situation where it was basically just an excuse to throw money out?
That's always been the excuse, and I've been railing about that for years, for decades, actually. I mean, anytime, first of all, California has become the home of these 501c3s that throw lavish galas and raise millions and millions of dollars, and the problems only get worse. Now, I'm assuming that probably happens in other cities across the country, but I've just experienced it here in California. As a young, naive business owner and chef, I got involved and helped a lot of those organizations. I'm not going to name them over the years, and, only to watch the problems get worse. And when I question it, it's kind of like, oh no, you're always presented with this obfuscation of, oh, look over here, and this is what we did on this side, but we've now got this problem over here. So when I saw this money being touted during the fire relief efforts, I knew that it wasn't going to go to anywhere good. I mean, we raised over $600,000, and every single day I was showing my audience exactly where every single dollar went, but literally presenting to them, hey, we have 300 of these laptops that are going to the Dream Center that are going to a local school. We have 500 breakfast burritos that I just made with your donations that I'm now handing out in Altadena, right? It is literal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that's a huge difference when it comes compared to government. You have your restaurant in Huntington Beach, and you became a member of the Huntington Beach City Council this past year. Obviously, you're invested in California. You have wanted to make things work there as a small business owner. What is it you've learned from that experience on city council, and what have you seen up close?
I've seen that local politics is a lot more important than people imagine. Obviously it's the national elections and many of those state elections with big personalities that get the headlines and gets everybody excited. But, you plant those seeds locally and they're harvesting the fruit on a state and a federal level at all times. It's really interesting, especially in California, to see when you've got a local coalition between not just the city of Huntington Beach, but other cities, as well as the county and the board of supervisors and many state representatives, how you can actually patchwork together various initiatives, even with a Democratic supermajority up in Sacramento that's doing absolutely everything to make sure that there are zero successes from those of us on a local level who actually want to kind of buck the trend. So the people of Huntington Beach, as many would like to suggest, some people say, oh my gosh, it's just this MAGA city and it's this overwhelmingly conservative city. I would actually say it's not. It's just, we know the Overton window is shift, but it's really just a city of reasonably minded people who frankly want a little less government in their lives. It's not this crazy right-wing city. So they've spoken, and now you're starting to see that like a contagion. What I've seen, though, just in regards to the inner workings of politics, is what I was afraid of. How, I don't want to say corrupt, but like it is an insider's game. And, that needs to stop. Really, it's about, well, why is this? Let's take even on local politics, for example, why is this policy in place? Why is this ordinance in place? Well, there was a mayor 25 years ago who kind of put this in place, and then subsequent council members, made sure we galvanized that position, and that person's no longer around. But I guess it's just the way that it is. And it's like, wait, so we're not thinking logically, like it's not a good policy. So can we get rid of it now? It's like, oh, I guess so. Right. Like there is just so much in politics that is, that is not working as a result of the size of government and the way that it's been. But I actually firmly believe that things can be flipped upside down in various local areas, and then that will spread to a state level.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that you bring up there that sticks out to me is the fact that you sound like, even as much as you're convinced of the corruption, that you still think that something can be done in California. How come you're not black-pilled on the future of the state?
Well, because I'm on the ground level, right? Like I'm speaking to the people all over. And it's really, if you break it down by the numbers, you've got you got a couple big cities, right? You got San Diego, you got Los Angeles, San Francisco, high density. They're always going to win, whether you want to say that's just because the people are, kind of drive-by voters and they just believe the headlines, or there's corruption there in regards to the voter rolls and the voting process. Either way, those big cities are going to win. But when you get outside of those big cities and you talk to people through Central Valley and kind of like east of Los Angeles and away from the coastal elites, you see that the bulk and the lion's share of voters in California don't agree with the way in which Sacramento is being run. So you have two factions of those. We don't believe in the way Sacramento is being run. You have obviously like hardcore kind of a much more pro MAGA crowd. But then you have, as I just mentioned, that like kind of moderate, liberty focused individual who isn't right, isn't left, maybe a little bit more libertarian and wants something new. So I think that the numbers are there. We just need to kind of coalesce and like really put it together in a way that we can win mathematically, And I think I look at like Steve Hilton, for example, who's been campaigning for well over a year, has really, really put in the time and put together some good policy. He's touched every single voter in like, all the cities and counties in California, and people are responding well to that.
What if you had the ability to, wave a magic wand, what reforms would you like to see either at the federal level or at the state regulatory level that would benefit when it comes to restaurant labor laws and the regulations that you face?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's funny you say labor laws. That's why I'm laughing, because so much of it is just the egregious labor laws. PAGA in California, which is the Private Attorneys General's Act, is the worst of the worst. It's a mafia shakedown by the trial attorneys in which they give the employee the right to sue on the basis of a class. It's class action, or really actually sue on behalf of the attorney general, right? Because they said at one point, California said, well, we can't take on all these labor cases, most of which were primarily in construction and a couple other industries. So we're going to give the employee the ability to file these suits on behalf of the attorneys general. And the trial attorneys took advantage of that. And now it's really become kind of that slip and fall lawsuit against business owners, where every single business owner is getting a PAGA lawsuit, and it's an automatic win for the plaintiffs. And they're being paid by the trial attorneys to file these lawsuits against restaurants. These are well over six figures, in the $1 million range, even for businesses that are only grossing $3 to $4 million. It's driven hundreds of thousands of businesses out of the state of California. But it's that flavor of a lawsuit where the state sees it as the business owner is nothing more than a piggy bank that we need to smash and rob. So they use the labor element as the means by which they can take money and sue these businesses, small, medium, and large, and then they take their own cut, because these lawsuits that settle, the state takes the lion's share of the settlement. The employee doesn't even get that. And that's happening in states all around the country. These types of lawsuits should be illegal, period.
So is this, you talk about them viewing the businesses as being piggy banks. Is this a situation where there's a certain limit? Because what we've seen is, the ability of other industries to move out of the state. The problem is, of course, that for small businesses, especially for restaurants, that has to be virtually impossible, just given how much you've built up there and everything that goes into it. It's not like you can, uproot the way that Elon Musk has and that other industries have and just move to Texas.
That's a great point. Yeah. You can't move a business out of state until your business probably hits $100 million run rate. Because if the cost of the move is going to be $500,000 to $1 million, that's the entirety of a year's sales in some restaurants, or 50% of their sales. So you just don't have the financial capability to, quote, move out of state. You can't eat those losses. So that's not possible in a small business retail setting, retail restaurants, et cetera. Especially brick and mortar, right?
One of the other aspects in terms of the burdensome nature of California regulations, of course, is on housing. There's this whole movement that has prevented the creation of the kind of housing that people in California, clearly want to have. Again, is there kind of a breaking point there, some point where California recognizes that the regulatory burden, even in a situation where there's such clear demand for more housing, has to be reconsidered, and that these people who are keeping any kind of development out of the state, need to understand the kind of risks that they're running in terms of the future of California?
Yes. Well, I think that some in Sacramento are starting to recognize that. But once again, I mean, even when you see glimmers of intellectual hope in any state or any level of government, if the bureaucracy's gotten too big, the hope is always going to be extinguished. So in California, you're still going to get taken over by the bureaucracy, whether it's CEQA, whether it's CARB, whether it's the Coastal Commission, right? Like the regulations that are in place, and many of these bureaucracies and these agencies have been set up actually to be used as a bludgeon against developers and business owners, so that you either can't develop or you can't do your business, have been gotten so big, right, that they're now being taken advantage of by individuals and small local groups. So what I mean is that, let's just say, for example, California looks at a city and goes, you know what? Go ahead, have at it, right? The developer can have at it. And we're gonna waive CEQA, right, which is the environmental reform, or the environmental quality, which has the review that it has to go through. We're gonna waive all the Coastal Commission regulations. We're gonna waive everything. Well, now let's say you have 3, NIMBYs in that town that say, we don't want you to develop at all. They're gonna use CEQA and use the Coastal Commission
Yep.
and sue on behalf of the regulations that have been put in place. And California's like, shoot, okay, well, there's nothing we can do. And then you get dragged out in 2 to 3 year long lawsuits because of, right, the nature of those government agencies that are put in place.
There's been, some talk about, kind of the war, obviously, that has taken over in the lefty policy sphere between the NIMBYs and the YIMBYs. Who do you think, Andrew, is winning that war in terms of California currently? Do you think that there's someone who is a clear leader of pushing that argument? Or is this something that is just esoteric and is basically just nerds slap fighting with each other on Twitter?
It's a little bit of nerd slap fighting with each other. I would say that the housing piece, like everybody is kind of at this point in California, NIMBY to some degree. I would actually suggest that it's not a political debate. It's a socioeconomic debate. So anybody in a certain upper class, kind of elite area is always going to say, not in my backyard, right? And they're against development, regardless of their political party. I always make the joke, like, when does a developer become an environmentalist? And in California, that's when they get their house at the beach. So
yes.
I've seen it on both sides, right, in regards to that. But it's the type of development, you see. So now the way it's broken down is that because of these housing mandates, right, through a whole nother conversation for another time, but the housing element where the Sacramento's forcing numbers of houses on various cities, like here in Huntington Beach, like they're mandating that we have, well, it's about 13,000 to 15,000 affordable housing units. You see, it's not about housing. In Sacramento, it's about affordable housing. And the same in New Jersey and various other states. So they're saying, like, you need to have we've isolated 450 acres in your city that you can develop, and you can develop up to 150 units an acre, which is high density. Therefore, 450 times 150 is, 50,000, but 20% of that needs to be affordable housing. So therefore you need 10,000 new affordable housing units within the next 5 years, or else you're being sued by the state. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's the type of housing, because many in those cities might say, well, you know what, we can handle another 5 or 10,000, but it's going to be single family homes, 15 units an acre, low density, mixed use, retail, residential, et cetera. And that's where the fights are coming out, because do you want to redefine a city with 150 units an acre and turn it into Long Beach or Los Angeles? And the state and the city of or Sacramento, they're suggesting that we literally overturn these cities and turn them into high density, high rise cities.
The one more question about the housing situation. We've seen, you probably have seen it, this viral chart that went around just showing the decline of people under the age of 30 who are married and own a home. And it's just a gigantic decline from the 1950s. And the question that I have for you about that is, I know that you're someone who cares about neighborhood and family formation and that type of thing as being a very beneficial thing for the country. Do you think that there's any understanding on the part of the California leadership that they're only contributing to this problem, that they're delaying family formation, they're delaying more kids? And then my follow-up would be, is that something that they think is a good thing?
Yes, of course. They don't care. They don't want that. Yeah. And that's where I go back to the kind of that babbling speech I just made about the types of homes. Is California wants high density housing, 150 units an acre in cities, in these kind of, and you will live in the pod. I mean, maybe not to that degree, right? Yeah. But I'll use the cliche. And they don't care about like single family homes. They don't care about suburban communities. They want to prevent suburban sprawl. They want to be able to use a lot of that open space for some of their kind of quasi environmental dreams. And those are not actually to help the environment. They're to enrich the utility companies and many of these other kind of forward-thinking green companies that they've invested in to take the space, whether it's to put battery farms, wind farms, solar farms, et cetera. So that's the way in which they want to see these housing units get introduced, so they can say, look, you get an apartment here for $2,000 a month in the city, and you walk downstairs and there's a grocery store, and they want that new city to pop up all over the place.
You had a couple of posts. Let's shift to talking about the restaurant industry a bit more, about food trucks that I saw getting a good bit of attention. You advise never open a food truck. I guarantee maybe 2% of food trucks in America profit. Those that do have the best trucks invest the most money and probably don't return capital until 10 years. You went on to say more than that. Tell me a little bit about why nobody should start a food truck.
Food trucks were a blip in time. It was for about 6 months. Food trucks were traditionally for decades. It was the guys out there on the construction lots feeding people black coffee and, bad sandwiches. Nobody ever audited them. Who knows where they were parking the trucks? It was just this whole other industry and this whole other economy. And then in 2010, 2011, crazy guys like me saw that and went to these lots and said, "Hey, how much you make in a week?" They said $500 a week. I said, "I'll pay you $600. Let me borrow your truck for a week." And I started driving the food truck to places like University of California, Irvine, and all of these other hipster lots throughout Southern California, right? There was probably 10 or 15 others that did the same thing. So I'm not saying I was the architect of that. Over that 6-month period when we were doing that, we were flying under the radar, right? And it was the coolest thing in the world. It was like a culinary scavenger hunt. Everybody wanted to find where we were. It was this cool thing. Now there are these food trucks with these hip branding. Fast forward 6 months, there was 100 food trucks on the road, then 500, right? By the time I got out, I opened my first food truck in May 5th, 2011, and I closed it on December 20th, 2011. My monthly cost went from like $300 a month in just fixed costs to about $5,000. Cities, especially in California, moved so quickly, and the people that were zoning for these food trucks started charging everybody to park them that it just, in a matter of 6 months, you couldn't make any money. That's what's happened with food trucks. But the thing is, like many other trends, there's that little window where you can make money, but then everybody thinks it's the way to go because then the trend gets so much media and so much marketing for 3 or 4 years thereafter. And everybody thinks it's the thing to do, but it's like, no, the trend came and went. It's over.
What's just as an attendant question now, what's your thoughts on ghost kitchens and like the delivery only kind of model as being an alternative to that?
Great question. Same exact situation. 6-month window about 10 years ago, and people are still trying to do it. By the way, all those companies that then got built up and bought out by private equity and then were growing across the nation, all of them bankrupt. They've lost everything because it was hip, it was cool, but then when everyone tried to do it, it just doesn't work. Like, you can't flood the market with that. The reason it's cool is because it's nowhere.
Talk to me a bit about something that's attendant to this, because to me, the food truck trend was also coming at the same point where the influencer trend was changing and becoming different. Are influencers good for the industry, or is influencer drama too much of a risk, given that we've seen it now, create backlash in certain cases?
By the way, great question again, because I feel like this isn't really talked about much. This is the bane of my existence. I mean, we were the viral restaurant when the influencers were coming about, and I would create dishes knowing the influencers would blow them up. I mean, that was really built a lot of my business in the beginning in 2013, 2014. Our ramen lobster burrito that was on BuzzFeed. Mm-hmm. I mean, we would have lines of thousands of people outside the restaurant. And I'm like, this is the worst thing I've ever made. And yet there's 1,000 people here that want to eat it. And it was because of the influencers. And those influencers at the time were making a lot of money. Not from us, but like business were paying them a lot of money. And then the social media platforms started tweaking their algorithms and realizing they wanted their cut, right? So they started tweaking the algorithm. And if you paid for followers and you started to like pay to promote your own profile, then they would blast your content. So you had these non-influencers who were basically buying cachet. And then the real influencers were like, well, once again, like me with the food truck, were like, screw this, I'm out. The window closed. they all went away. All my friends who were the big influencers, most of them are gone. Now you've got all the quasi-influencers who are paying for it, and they're not doing anything for your brand. So like, we don't use any of them. We don't engage with any of them. A lot of the real influencers are actually people who just have real accounts unrelated to what product you're selling. So like, let's say I have an attorney who happens to have a really good X account. Like, I would pay that guy to come into my restaurant, not because he posts about food or knows anything about food, but he's then going to slowly pepper in that he's been at my restaurant and his followers are going to come in. So that's kind of the way it's working now.
So my question to you following on that is, it sounds like kind of the opposite of the way this is depicted in, say, Chef or The Bear, meaning that the leaning into the influencer side of things actually traps you into making things that you otherwise wouldn't make. Is that true?
1,000%, right? Like, because now it's such a short game, right? Like you're really only posting, it's the cliche, you're posting for likes. So you're creating food that's really hyperbolic and over the top, and you're just trying to make things go viral. And then you get addicted, right? Like these businesses, not the users, but the businesses were getting addicted to the dopamine hit of going viral. And they're seeking that, like desperately seeking that next viral item. And it just ruins the entire integrity of the business. And by the way, these people don't spend money, and their audiences rarely spend money. They'll come in, they'll visit you, they'll check you out once, and it's all over.
Yeah, they just come in to get the thing, and once they've had the thing, they move on. Just because I just asked you about those, does it bother you to watch depictions of your industry that get as much attention as something like The Bear?
I don't even watch it, right? So everybody asks me like, "Oh, do you watch The Bear? Do you watch The Bear?" And I'm like, honestly, I didn't even know it was still on. I mean, it's hard for me to go from 15 hours of working in a restaurant to come home and like, watch something like that. I don't watch much TV. As you know, having kids, it's hard to watch TV. But generally speaking, so much of that is not correct that it frustrates me so much I can't even indulge.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch. The realm of influencers, as long as we're still in there, the whole category of chef influencer that's out there, when you're looking for something on, let's say, people look for recipes on YouTube all the time. There's these depictions of recipes that are on there that I find irritating because they either lack clear instruction or they're very unrealistic in terms of the depiction of how you're going to go about making something. And then it's very difficult to have some kind of quality because you don't really have any kind of expectation going in. And yet I know a lot of people who rely on that, as being their guide to making things in the kitchen. Is there something that people should watch for as being a key indicator of this is a chef who is making something that is realistic, that you can actually make at home, and have some confidence in, versus someone who's making something ridiculous just for the clicks?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I would just look at, in the first 1 or 2 minutes of a video, like, do they have all the ingredients lined up, and are they going to walk you through it? The original cooking videos that worked were the dump and stir videos of like the 1980s and 1990s, right? Jan Can Cook, Julia Childs, Jacques Pepin, like those were the original cooking videos. And if you recall in those videos, like they're just sitting there in front of a camera with all their ingredients laid out, and they're literally dumping and stirring and walking you through it with their personality, which is what made them special. I look for those types of cooking videos. We're addicted to the kind of short 90-second, like flash type video, but look for the 20-minute long, boring video because you learn it once, you get the muscle memory going, and then you have a framework for how to put any dish together.
Having some perspective with distance, and I don't even know actually what your original opinion was of what they created. One of the biggest stories in the food media space over the last several years was the utter collapse of the Bon Appetit empire under the weight of DEI, BLM type stuff, and a lot of in-office politics, as well as some fractiousness and frankly, some things that had nothing to do with the food in question. It was something that had enormous popularity online at the time that it blew up. What do you think about the lessons that are taken away from that? Obviously, a lot of those people are still around, doing their own separate things. But how ridiculous does that seem in retrospect, in terms of the degree to which politics took over something that just was, pleasing food television for a lot of people?
Well, they couldn't help themselves. That's the problem, because I've said in my platform is food is the great unifier. So in actuality, I think that there was an opportunity to bring people together through food, having such a large platform and a legacy outlet like Bon Appetit. But instead, they allowed it to do the opposite. So they forced and they jammed down the readers and the viewers' throats all of these, these tropes that at the time were hot and you had to talk about, but you didn't. That's the thing. You really didn't. And you saw the same. I mean, food and cooking and even that, it's like an institution, right? In sports, it's the same way. And then we saw the same thing happen with sports. And I think they lost a large portion of their viewership. Now, of course, they've garnered that back, and they've tried to distance themselves from that era of disaster. But once again, all you had to do, you could have been woke, and you still could have leaned into some of that, but you could have done it through the prism of this is a different culture of food, and here's how they live their life, and we can see it through food. And you could have peppered in some of those woke, those little woke cliches, but you just didn't have to jam it down our throat, pun intended. And I think that the market reacted.
Is all food cultural appropriation?
Of course it is. 100%. I mean, it's there's this clip right now that's going viral, and it's been going viral for a month or two about slavery, right? And it's kind of like everyone's pointing at each other, different countries. It's a European focus clip, and it's like, well, you had slaves and you had slaves, and it's right. It's like, and you read back and you look at the history and you're like, well, I mean, there's some truth to a lot of this type of stuff, right? And then you get into this kind of like circular argument as to like pointing a finger at everybody. Recipes and food, there is no starting point, right? And sorry, horrible analogy to draw to slavery, but like my point is that when chefs
can I jump in and give you a point to say why? Here's the thing that I think is so ironic of that. I've sat next to people who have very woke liberal views. In fact, in this case, this was at a dinner event that Sheldon Whitehouse was hosting, attacking Clarence Thomas. And they had a short menu there at one of the restaurants here in DC, and one of the options that you could buy was shrimp and grits. And I just thought that was the most out of touch. You have no idea what you're talking about. He's literally the people this came from, because they were the slaves. They got their portion of grits. They got their salt for the day. And then they would go and catch the brine shrimp that were down there where the gullas lived, and they would put that together. And that's to be that out of touch, that you have a guy who comes from that himself, that you're attacking at this event with this pretentious white guy, who's belonged to a whites only club. It still makes me, I have to laugh on some level, because it's just darkly comedic, that they would be so out of touch with where food comes from. Anyway, I want to ask one more question before I get into some summer fun food stuff. Restaurants have obviously retained this tipping setup that they have, and same with so many different stores and things like that existed and was launched during COVID. But now, when I ask for something that is I go up to a counter, and this just literally happened yesterday, and I was getting literally 2 cans of just sodas out of the fridge at the place, and went up to it just like a slightly fancy coffee shop, and am immediately presented with the lowest tip automatically being 20%. Yeah. For 2 cans that I got out of a fridge myself and brought to the person who's checking me out. What can we do to get away from that? Or is it just going to require some kind of willingness on our part to accept the social stigma of no, I'm not going to tip you when you did not do anything?
Yes, we just need to have the fortitude to say no. Even this is coming from a guy who really is pro tipping and like pro hospitality, but it's gone too far. Like the scenarios in which you're expected to tip now is absolutely absurd. And I think that in the restaurant industry now, that's being used as kind of it's really the tip of the spear. It's where the arguments are being had. And they're like, well, you make so much as it is, or pay a living wage or what have you. First, I think we need to make it clear here. This is that I'll use my restaurant as an example. When I opened, I sat down my team members and I was like, hey, do you guys want to make a base wage of like somewhere, and I got to figure out the math, between $30 and $40 an hour with no tips? Or do you want to make at the time it was $16 an hour as the minimum wage. Everybody thinks it's a tip wage. It's not in California. Mm-hmm. So you make the minimum $16 an hour plus tips. Every single person said, hands down, 16 plus tipping. If you do the fixed 35, we will not work here, and good luck ever finding employees. They don't want that. They want the tips. They now make upwards, most of my team members make upwards of like 60 to 80 bucks an hour. We pay full payroll taxes on that. That's the other thing I don't think people realize. Part of my motivation is I don't want to pay the payroll taxes on $80 an hour when I'm paying you as an entry level team member. And I'm not putting them down. Actually, many of them are not entry level. So let's say even at 25 an hour, I'm paying payroll taxes on $80 an hour. So it's better for the business because then you can plan for it. The team, they don't want this. So the people arguing about, well, pay them a living wage and get rid of tips. Nobody wants that. So the people arguing need to just shut up because they don't even know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. What does the president's change in taxes on tips policy mean for all of that?
Well, it means that those tipped workers get probably an extra $5,000 or $10,000 in their pocket each year. When you read through it all and you run it through, because there's limitations on it, and obviously, it's a bit more complicated than just no tax on tips. You know that, but keep in mind that's not for the business. This was strictly for the worker and only on federal taxes. So in states like California, I guarantee you they're just going to double the payroll tax. They're not going to let these people walk with more money in their pocket. That's
my assumption as well, which was always, I felt like, the thing that people were missing about how the blue states are going to respond to this. Yeah, exactly. So let's get to some summer stuff. This time of year, lots of people are traveling. They, and particularly, if you're a family or something like that, you may be going to a beach house or an Airbnb or, the mountains or what have you. For vacation, if you can afford it, and I hope that our listeners can. When someone travels with family like that, there's always certain expectations that are associated with food. Not everybody's the same way, but a lot of the time you end up in places where you don't. If you're going to the beach for a week, you don't want your kids to be eating fried fish from the local places every single day. And you also kind of, you might want to grill. You might want to cook something else. You might want to do a broil. What is your advice for approaching traveling when you want to make something? How do you balance the need to sort of do things that can be done pretty simply with wanting to kind of impress your family and things like that if you're getting together, like you do once a year or two?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, okay, first and foremost, I always love cooking when I'm in an Airbnb or when I'm traveling someplace new and having fun. I think that there's also opportunities to do like group cooking in small settings or hotel Airbnb-like settings. You just got to get ahead of it, right? So I always travel with like an 8-inch chef knife, make sure I pack that in, make sure you've got your knife and cutting board and some sort of like large cooking vessel. So know that when you get somewhere, like you're going to need to figure out where your cutting board is and all those basic essentials when you're going out to eat and you're cooking. But I think it's incumbent upon everybody when they travel to go try and find a local market, like hop up on Yelp, whether it's a fish market, whether it's a meat market, like find out where all the locals are going to shop. And get that, find out the product that area is known for and celebrate that. So no matter where you are, there's going to be a product there and cook it. It's that easy.
When you're traveling, what, in addition to that knife, are you bringing? In addition to that cutting board, are you bringing? For me, one of the things that I have found over the years is I can't be. I always bring a thermometer. And I always bring at least one type of implement that is for something I know I want to make. So, I mean, it can be, a better grater or, just some other kind of thing. Just one thing that I know I'm going to at least make this once. So this is the thing that they're probably not going to have at a, mid-tier house or Airbnb. Is there something in particular that you think people should think about when it comes to that, and just kind of have it take with them as a travel expectation that is something that, maybe you've gone somewhere before and it just, they didn't have one thing that you thought they would obviously have?
Yeah, I would definitely microplane, 100%. Always bring a microplane. You're using that to zest fruits. You're using it to grate garlic. That's key. Cheese, right? Anything. So microplane for certain. And then if you really are into barbecue and rubs and you want your spice, you want to up your spice game, just a small little compact coffee mill, coffee grinder. I mean, we've got coffee grinders all over the house. Some we use for coffee, others we use for black pepper, others we use for warm spices, hot spices, whatever, right? A coffee grinder is key, generally speaking. And then, I'm a salt guy. So like I actually do travel with different types of sea salt. I firmly believe, and we even find it like the kids will use it now. They'll be like, where's the sea salt? Like if we go out to eat, they're re-seasoning their food. So we're obsessed with certain types of sea salt. I would say those would be the three.
The thing that I've discovered is that spices are really key because that's something that is difficult to find even in some of these places that have really good markets or something like that. And then you end up driving all over the place, looking for something that you easily could have gotten and brought from home. And so to me, that's key, too. To me, some of the other aspects of this that I think are a little challenging for folks is that they don't know necessarily how to use the equipment that's in front of them. So many, most Airbnbs that families are going to go to are going to have, a grill, they're going to have an oven, they're going to have a stove that people are unfamiliar with. Is there a good way to test out sort of the different things that are maybe going to be a little finicky with it, in a way that doesn't risk ruining your food? Meaning that, testing out the oven before you put something in to figure out, whether it's going to have any problem with heat, figuring out on a grill, what you're going to have to deal with when it comes to hot spots and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I always blast a grill in a new place. I go in, I blast a grill to the highest possible temperature you can get, because that also allows you to clean the grill. Most of them aren't cleaned, right? So when it gets crazy hot like that, then all you got to do is run the brush or run like an oiled towel over the grill. And now you've got yourself a clean grill. Plus, what the temp's going to get up to. Yeah. And then I actually do the same with the oven. In many cases is because I'm kind of an oven grill guy. Like I don't love direct heat. And when I say grill, I use second tier on the grill. I don't love direct heat unless I'm finishing food or doing like flash sear for 5 minutes on food. So I always want to know what my heat source is going to be that's going to finish, and then where I'm going to convect cook most of my food, be it the oven or the grill.
The culture around cookbooks these days, they look so beautiful and have so many great pictures in them. And I see them sitting on people's bookshelves, not even close to where they would be used to cook, and looking like they have either never been opened or were basically coffee table books. How can we change that? And is this a problem, or is it something that is just think of it as a piece of art as opposed to something that you're necessarily going to rely on?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. They look so pretty and they have great pictures. That pretty much sums up modern cookbooks. We've now moved from cookbooks. My
favorite is my old copy of Joy of Cooking, which has just some sketches in it.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, I think every kitchen I went into growing up, in the 80s and 90s had like the Joy of Cooking with a little lace thing hanging out for the page holder, like in the kitchen. Now that's probably in an antique store somewhere. I think that cookbooks have gone from functional to coffee table books, and look, that's a good thing. Pictures of food are inspiring, and you can get some knowledge from that. I still think there's some good functional cookbooks out there. We wrote ours with that in mind, as like a family cookbook and making it really easy and approachable. But, look at the recipes in cookbooks and look at the ingredient list. And if it's too confusing, like, first of all, people pay for cookbooks and they've got, it's 4 ingredients in a recipe. Why are you paying for that? Look for things that you can't do yourself and you're learning something a little bit new with a focus. And that's the type of cookbook that I want to buy.
What's something that you're going to make within the next couple of weeks that you're excited about for your family?
We've got, we're coming into Hatch chili season right now. Just started. If you know about Hatch chilies, they're based out of Hatch, New Mexico, an absolute delicacy. So you'll find them all over the West Coast. And our produce purveyor actually owns a huge plot in Hatch, New Mexico. So they've started harvesting them and are driving every single day, driving trucks over. I've got 6 cases right now that are being dropped off at the restaurant, and I'm going to be making Hatch everything. So we're smoking them, we're grilling them, and I'm making like fermented Hatch chili salsas. We're doing Hatch chili burgers. We're doing stuffed Hatch chili seafood dishes, and then that moves right into spiny lobster season. So I'm going to marry the two at some point here with like a fermented and smoked Hatch chili butter and lobster, kind of grilled lobster setup. So I got my work cut out for me over the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Last question for you. I have focused on having young kids, doing my best to get them to eat everything. And they're pretty good at it. They eat a lot of sushi, and they eat a lot of things that other kids, families with other kids are surprised that they eat. But it seems to me that there's some key things that go into that. And I'm wondering if you have your own tips about what people should do just to make sure that when they're getting their kids to come up, they don't end up in a situation as one of my friends sadly has with one of their kids, where they literally travel with a bag of frozen chicken nuggets.
Kids will eat absolutely anything so long as they're involved in the cooking process or they cooked it themselves. So what I've noticed is that when I get my kids, the other day, like one of the first things I have my children do when they're learning knife skills is I buy tons of mushrooms, and I get one of those salad knives, those plastic salad knives. And I remember letting my 2-year-old, who would sit down at his little baby table and with a cutting board, and he would cut the mushrooms. And then I would walk him over to the stove and we would cook the mushrooms, and he would eat the whole bowl of mushrooms. If I gave him mushrooms outside of that situation, he would go, "Those are disgusting. Get those away from me." Anything that the kids cook and prepare themselves, they are 90% more likely to eat themselves.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great piece of advice. Chef Gruel, you can follow him on X at Chef Gruel and at Andrew Gruel on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining the Big Ben Show.
It's an honor. Thank you so much, and good to see you.
Let's wrap things up with the grab bag. I want to talk to you for a moment about something that has been on my mind because of summer travel and some of the issues that are related to it, especially if you have children. And this could be true whether you have young kids or teenagers or the like. Travel is the one time where people who naturally have a hesitancy to put screens in front of their kids, they actually have to cave, because in those long airplane trips and those long drives to get to the beach or get to the mountains, what have you, this is a situation where you're just not going to be able to sustain, board games and drawing and the kind of thing like that very easily over the course of hour after hour for multiple kids. But one of the things that I think is good, if you have to resort to using those screens and putting them in front of your kids for a couple of hours, is to have a mindset that doesn't just depend on firing up YouTube and searching for something you know that they already like, or putting on one of these streaming TV shows that just runs and runs and runs. I love Bluey, but the fact is that once it starts, they don't want it to stop. What I would suggest to you instead is, whether you're using screens there or whether you're needing to use a screen during the course of a vacation, take the opportunity to introduce your family to the long distant past. The History Center of Denver, Colorado announced a few months back that they were opening a museum of an exhibit of the 1990s, those distant eras that we have only on the edge of our memory. I think the movies of the 90s and the 2000s deserve to have more appreciation, especially for the fact that they were very kid-friendly and they told original stories. Don't just resort to the front page of Disney Plus or Hulu or Netflix. Instead, I hope that you'll consider showing your kids, introducing them to things like American Tail or Flight of the Navigator, of Goonies, or of the Wallace and Gromit series. The heartfelt nature of something like Brad Bird's towards Iron Giant, which is just an absolute classic. Or you could show them funnier stuff like Short Circuit or any number of sports movies. I think the original Mighty Ducks holds up really well. So does, by the way, the original Jumanji, which my kids love, even if it's a little scary at parts and the CGI is a little bit bad. But if there's one movie in particular that I would encourage you to introduce, especially if you have young boys, go back and watch The Rocketeer. Joe Johnston's The Rocketeer is one of the classics. It's totally underappreciated, and it's got just sort of slapstick stuff, but it's also something that is kind of from an era when Disney was trying to do things that it doesn't try to do anymore with movies. The Rocketeer, check it out, and try to show your people something other than just what's coming up with the algorithm. Dig just a little bit more. I'm Ben Dominant. You've been listening to another edition of The Big Ben Show. You can email us, as always, at bigben@fox.com. We'll be back next week with more to dive back into the fray.